Sorry, Chair, just to confirm we are ready whenever you are.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Esme, if you could put your camera off, thank you. Can everybody turn your cameras off? Thank you. Welcome to today's meeting of Suffolk Public Sector Leaders. I am Councillor Suzie Morley, Leader of Mid-Suffolk District Council, and I will be chairing the meeting today. This meeting is being broadcast live and is available to watch on Suffolk County Council's website whilst we're in public session. Item 1 is welcome and apologies. I've received apologies from Chief Constable Stephen Jupp, and we have with us Deputy Chief Constable Rachel Kearton attending. I've also received apologies from Chris Starkey, Ed Garratt, and Tim Passmore may be joining us later on. Thank you. Item number 2 is the notes of the last meeting and the actions arising. I'd like to invite Caroline Davison to talk us through this. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. There are no outstanding actions. Just to let leaders know that we will add to future meetings the commitment to look at a review of Suffolk's response to COVID-19 on a future agenda, along with updates on the outcomes of the funding that was agreed to be released by leaders last time. So that's the funding for the Climate Emergency Plan and the Suffolk Inclusive Growth Investment Framework.
Lovely, thank you, Caroline. Can I ask for agreement from councillors to the notes? Thank you. Councillor Ward?
Sorry, yeah, just one clarification on item 5A, where I was quoted as saying over 150 businesses taking part in the virtual high street. I can't actually remember whether I said 150 or not, but just to clarify, that's 150 in Sudbury alone, but about 350 across all 5 towns in Babergh and Mid-Suffolk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. If I don't hear anything to the contrary, I'll take that as an agreement from everybody. Lovely, thank you, everybody. Item 3 is update on the latest position with the Strategic Recovery Group. I'm going to invite Chief Constable Rachel Kearton to provide an update on the current position in her role as Chair of the Strategic Recovery Group. Thank you, Rachel.
Morning, Suzie. Thank you very much. I would like to see if I can share a couple of slides just so that you don't need to look at me for the whole time, and hopefully there's some information here that is useful. So if you could just let me know if that comes up.
Yes, if you could just put that on presentation mode, that'd be great.
Yes. Okay.
Lovely.
Should be there. Great. Okay, so I'm here less in my role as replacing or standing in for the Chief Constable, and more as the chair of the SCG, the Strategic Coordinating Group that I've been chairing since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in March 2020. So I'll just start with a reminder to everybody what the Strategic Coordinating Group is and why the structure is there. We have covered this previously, but there's some new people on the call, and it's helpful just to remind ourselves what the purpose of the SCG is. So it brings together over 40 predominantly public sector organisations from across the county. We do have some private. We do also have partners, such as we have representatives from the US airbase as well, and similar other bodies. So it's an opportunity for us all to sit around the virtual table and make sure that we coordinate our response and have a same message or similar message to our organisations. It's a structure that is established through the Resilience Forum framework, which is a government framework for major incidents and critical incidents, and has been used over the years for flooding and other incidents that may require a public sector response. So it's not special for the pandemic. However, this is the first time that it has been used over such a protracted length of time. And as I say, the opportunity there is for us all to communicate, particularly messages, so that the public hopefully hear one voice and can see that we are all working together. It has a partner body, which is called the Recovery Coordinating Group, and I'll come on to that later. But at the moment, we are sitting as a strategic coordinating group. The difference between the two, other than I chair the SCG and Nicola Beach chairs the RCG, is that the SCG focuses on what's immediately happening and there's an urgency behind that, whereas the RCG is a much further thinking, strategic, long-term planning meeting, and they both aim to coordinate activity. The Recovery Coordinating Group has been formed twice over the last 18 months or so, and we've moved back into Strategic Coordinating Group to reflect the changing picture of the pandemic. Currently, Suffolk is covered by and described as an Enhanced Response Area, an ERA, and this has been only in place for a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. Colleagues and partners will remember that back in September, October, we did see a peak as the children went back to school. It was prior to our youngsters, our teenagers receiving the vaccination, and infection rates, particularly in Ipswich, did begin to take an upwards trend. The Suffolk SCG responded, and the ERA status was allocated from the centre from London to Suffolk, as well as other areas around the country that were experiencing a similar spike or increase in infections. And it has brought some additional resources to Suffolk, which we've been able to put to good use, and we are looking at a much more optimistic trend now with our infection rates. The expectation is that the ERA will end on the 5th of December, and at that point I intend to be handing over my chairpersonship to the RCG and to Nicola Beach. I just wanted to spend last 2 moments on the last couple of slides, particularly talking about enforcement from my own particular perspective and giving an update on Suffolk Constabulary in a little bit more detail. So the Constabulary has been working with trading standards arm in arm to work with the nighttime economy and licensing trade and businesses who, of course, have suffered so badly over the last 18 months. Looking to give a sense of reassurance and confidence in their customer base as they open up and face one of the busiest, if not the busiest period of their year as we approach Christmas. There's been a lot of support around joint visits, and those will continue throughout Christmas and the New Year, with the aim to encourage people to take safe approaches, but to be able to enjoy the facilities and the premises and celebrate the Christmas period. We have also in Suffolk Constabulary been dealing with a very low level number of anti-vaccination protests, and my final slide is in fact just to cover some of our response to protest. I would just ask as a message back to those participants at this meeting that we do operate well with that community intelligence that the Constabulary has received. As soon as anyone is aware that there may be a protest, I would ask that that information is fed back to us in the police. We can then work with the demonstrators in order to ensure that there's a peaceful protest which is not disruptive, and that we ensure that that protest goes ahead within the confines of legitimacy and without affecting, for example, a vaccination programme or schooling or whatever the other context may be. So the last slide there is just a bit of advice for people to take back and share, please, that we can continue to have a safe county, and infection rates, as I say, are looking very good. So, Suzie, that's just a brief overview of where the SCG is at the moment, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Lovely. Thank you, Rachel. Anybody got any questions they want to follow up? No.
Okay.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on now to item 4 is an update on Transport East. So I'd like to welcome Esme Yule, who's the comms lead at Transport East.
No problem. Yeah, so I'm from Transport East, the subnational transport body for Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Southend and Thurrock. And I'm here to update today on our work to develop a sub-regional transport strategy. So give me 1 second and I will also share some slides. Is that visible?
Yes, that's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just as background, we're one of the 7 subnational transport bodies across England outside London. We were established in 2008 as a highly collaborative regional partnership to drive forward investment in transport across the Eastern region. Some of the other STBs, like Midlands Connect Transport for the North, have been established for longer. And we've seen over the last couple of weeks how taking a regional approach and joining together can play notable dividends in terms of the levels of investment that have been committed from central government. Today, I'm going to take you through a little bit of the background, the strategy background, our work to the contents of that draft transport strategy and the supporting investment and delivery programme, and then touch at the end on our consultation and engagement approach over the next few months. So we've been asked by the DfT, who are our home government department, to create a transport strategy for the whole region that would set out the evidence base and our priorities for investment over the next 30 years to 2050. It will tackle local and national outcomes, is developed from a robust evidence base, and has been informed by really wide engagement over the last 12 months with partners across the region, including all of officers from all of the districts in Suffolk and the county, businesses, including Suffolk Growth Partnership and Suffolk Chamber, ports, including Felixstowe and others in the region, and local airports operators. And we ran a public survey in January last year to understand the perspective from the public as well. The idea is to then set out a clear delivery priorities with a single voice for the region, so that government has confidence in the priorities that we're presenting to them and can prioritise the investment across our region. We started this work around 12 months ago with to develop the technical evidence base to begin with, and set out a strong engagement programme to test our assumptions and our evidence, and work iteratively through that process to develop a strategic approach and a better framework for delivery of transport investment across the region. Currently, we've in the process of wrapping up all of that work into the documents to be presented for public consultation. That has also been tested through an integrated sustainability appraisal to make sure that the strategy that we're developing meets economic, social and environmental aspirations from a national regulatory perspective as well. We're looking to go out to consultation next week, and which will be running for 8 weeks up until the end of January, and I'll come on to kind of the details of that towards the end of the presentation. We set out a robust methodology for developing the transport strategy, which looked at what we wanted to achieve through that, developed a set of wider regional outcomes that are aligned with local, regional and national priorities, looked at a set of evidence deep dives, looking at particular thematic areas to make sure that we had the best evidence to be building our strategy from, and then also tested against some future scenarios for the development of the region, particularly around digital connectivity and the ability to work from home, reducing transport demand, looking at the rate and location potentially of future homes and jobs growth, and then also a scale of growth in general across the region in terms of kind of economic growth particularly. That helped us establish a set of transport outcomes and develop the strategic approach, which looks at 4 key strategic themes and set us a delivery pathway for each of those. Then we looked at how to prioritise future investment, developing a prioritisation framework for assessing new initiatives and schemes. This forms an investment pipeline of priority projects using existing priorities from across the region as a baseline, and then building into that new initiatives and ideas that have come forward through the development of the strategy and the engagement that we've had. Finally, that will be developing and refining a monitoring mechanism to make sure that we are on track as we progress the transport strategy and are able to flex that depending on the progress that the region's making in different areas. This slide sets out the agreed regional wider outcomes the transport strategy will help deliver, and I hope you see that the priorities for Suffolk and county and districts and local enterprise partnerships reflected within that. It was developed from a full review of local, regional and national strategies. There's been a lot of national strategies coming out over the last 12 months in relationship to transport, so we've had to iterate these depending on the emphasis that's been coming through central government. But they've been refined through our discussions across the region and tested through workshops and engagement as well. This led us to develop a core vision and as I mentioned, a set of 4 strategic priorities for the region. So a thriving economy for the East with fast, reliable, safe and resilient transport infrastructure, driving forward a future of inclusive and sustainable growth for decades to come. And within that, those 4 core strategic pathways are decarbonisation to net zero, connecting our growing towns and cities, energising coastal and rural communities, and unlocking our international gateways. These, as I mentioned, these emerged through the engagement process and the evidence base, and were refined within that. Each of these has a pathway which includes a set of goals, and each of those goals then breaks down into a set of specific actions for Transport East, which reflects our role as a strategic transport planning and case-making body. And within the strategy, you'll see that approach being taken across each of those pathways. Decarbonisation to net zero is effectively our core pathway. We had an initial evidence base developed in advance of starting the work on the transport strategy, which indicates that transport carbon emissions across the region are the largest contributing sector to our emissions at 42%, and the vast majority of that is from road transport. To understand this further, we commissioned Energy Systems Catapult, a public-private body that is kind of very expert in emissions and energy solutions, to look at where the basis of those emissions are across the region, how they break down across rural, urban, and then kind of coastal and small towns. And it is clear that for our region, the balance of emissions in terms of locations is pretty much 50-50 from both rural and more urban areas. We've also got a significant impact of emissions from the HGVs and freight vehicles that move through the area that support our 13 ports and airports, and our core role as kind of the gateway to the rest of the world when it comes to UK trade and goods movement. So we've got a significant challenge across the region in trying to meet net zero transport over the next 20 to 30 years, and so decarbonisation is our primary pathway within the strategy. As I mentioned, this breaks down into 4 key goals. These goals align with and are developed from the Royal Transport Planning Institute's framework for sustainable transport for sustainable development planning, and it's core that transport planning and development planning are integrated in terms of future the future approach to developing our communities. So goal 1 is zero carbon growth, and how we'll support your authorities to and your relationships with developers within your communities to plan, locate and design new development, reducing the need for people to make carbon intensive trips in the future. We recognise obviously that districts need to take into account other outcomes in terms of planning, and this is very much looking at things from a sustainable transport perspective. And then the other goals within this pathway are how then you could potentially mitigate or improve the scenarios for those communities that are not currently so well served by public transport and active travel solutions. So looking to reduce the demand for carbon intensive trips by localising living, reducing the distance that people need to travel, or by bringing services to homes by digital means. Shifting modes by supporting people to switch from private car to active and passenger transport and goods to more sustainable modes such as rail. And then also finally switching fuels with private passenger transport fleet and freight vehicles moving to net zero carbon fuels at the earliest opportunity, and particularly for more rural areas, investigating how we can support you all to deliver the electric vehicle infrastructure that will be needed over the next 10, 15 to 20 years is a core area of our work in the shorter term. The second pathway is around connecting our growing towns and cities. So that's around enhancing the links within and between our fastest growing places and business clusters. This is partly to enhance, obviously, the economy within the region and with our relationships with core economic centres just beyond our boundaries, such as Cambridge, going up into the Midlands, also to London as well, and recognises the fact that this region doesn't have a large economic metropolitan hub in the way that many other regions do, and our region is very reliant on the interconnectivity between all of our growing towns and cities, and then the communities and that support those in their hinterlands. So unlike a Derby or a Nottingham or a Bristol even, where actually you've got many journeys going into a centre that are much easier to be able to predict and provide for, our kind of web of journeys across all of our different towns and cities makes it more challenging to understand what those travel patterns are and where the demand is coming from and going to. Goal 6 is around delivering those. So goal 5 is around improving the connectivity within our towns and cities, particularly around walking, cycling and passenger transport. Goal 6 is around those connections, strategic connections between our growing towns and cities and the rest of the UK. And then goal 7 is around kind of that customer service that's needed to really integrate transport networks across the region from fares, from an interchange, and from a customer information perspective. Accessibility is also within there to make sure that the public transport journeys that we're offering are accessed easily by all and are easy to plan and undertake. The next pathway is around energising our rural and coastal communities. This takes actually some of the thinking, particularly around the urban areas, and reframes it for rural communities, where we recognise that those journeys tend to be longer, tend to be more challenging, and it can be difficult to access those essential education opportunities, shops and services. So Goal 8's around increasing that access from rural communities to all of those crucial drivers of transport demand. So better ways of taking people to places sustainably, switching modes and alternative fuels, supporting local communities to make those trips more locally where possible, encouraging the local provision of goods and services, looking at innovative solutions such as rural hubs, where you can bring together transport and other services into closer together, supporting regional partners to and the digital sector to provide alternative options to travel through better digital communications, recognising particularly that the transport deserts within the region are exacerbated by the digital connection deserts and the black spots, and that makes it difficult for people to be able to do things like work from home, but also makes it difficult for them to find out about services on the go and what's available to them if they can't get mobile access as well as broadband. Goal 9 focuses on our coastline and our coastal communities. By their nature, they're some of the most isolated from both the rest of the region and the wider UK, being at the end of roads and often designed in a way that's actually more accessible by sea and by river than it is by road. So, but there is some really crucial industries for both the UK and the region in those locations, including energy, shipping and logistics and tourism. So the pathways around and the activities around Goal 9 focus on those. And some of this is around exploring innovative solutions that Suffolk's already doing. So East Suffolk and their catch demand responsive transport, electric buses are one of those solutions that if we can find a way of making sustainable financially and expanding more broadly across the region, could be a really interesting way of solving some of the accessibility problems that are felt by rural and coastal communities. The final pathway is broken down into two, because ports and airports have very different needs. So unlocking international gateways, sort of part A, is around ports, and obviously for Suffolk, they've got the key port of Felixstowe and that turning into a free port, and the implications for Felixstowe and Harwich there, but also further up the coast with Lowestoft and Ipswich as well being crucial ports for the movement of agricultural materials and aggregates, but also supporting the offshore industry as well. So improving that capacity and journey time and reliability for freight and access to ports is really important. The reliability issue across the region is a real challenge. There's very few core routes that freight use, and across Suffolk that's particularly the A12 and the A14. When there's issues at Orwell Bridge, when there's issues at Copdock Interchange, then that has a knock-on implication for not just freight journeys, but also for passenger journeys as well. And that adds time and cost onto the delivery of those goods onwards and ultimately to the customer. Ports and the freight sector, as I mentioned, are one of those very challenging areas for decarbonisation. They're towards the end of the trajectory within the DfT's transport decarbonisation plan, recognising that the technology for those vehicles currently is at its early stages of development and testing. So we're keen to be able to work with the ports and others in the area that are looking at particularly hydrogen power and other supporting infrastructure to be able to move, to give confidence to the industry that this region, where they're travelling through, they have the ability to be able to trial new vehicles as quickly as possible, but also then as they roll them out more generally across the network, then they have the infrastructure there to be able to support them. And then also modal shift of freight, particularly from road to rail or to short sea shipping. Capacity on the rail network, particularly from Felixstowe out to the Midlands and the North, is very constrained. And although there has been improvements in recent years, there's particular pinch points in the region, particularly Hawley Junction and Ely, but longer term, looking at the opportunities for East West Rail Eastern Extension to be able to dramatically increase the capacity of the rail network to be able to take additional freight and remove those HGVs from our roads. Suffolk doesn't have its own international airport, but obviously our region hosts three, with Stansted being the largest, and Norwich and Southend also serving locally, regionally important destinations across Europe, particularly. And one of the challenges, I think, particularly from Stansted, is that it's got really good, sustainable connections to the south and west, but is poorer connections to the north. Norwich Airport as well, is distant from sustainable transport connections in that area, and so predominantly accessed by car. So looking at improving those passenger and employee connections to airports through better and sustainable surface access, supporting the government and aviation through the Jet Zero approach and other mechanisms to deliver net zero emissions from aviation by 2050. Stansted are very advanced in a lot of this and are leading the way in many areas, but how Transport East can support those initiatives to be adopted by those other regional airports as well. And then shifting modes by supporting people to switch from private car to active and passenger transport and goods to more sustainable modes like rail. Airports also operate as hubs for quite a lot of business, supporting business activity, and it's how you can look at those areas as more of a cluster of businesses and drivers of transport demand, and how they can work more effectively together to deliver some of these changes. In our work, we've identified 7 strategic corridors that run through the region that are the core movement corridors, and many of the existing priorities that have come through our engagement with local authorities sit along these road and rail links. So a lot of our work in the shorter term is going to be focused on how we can improve the connectivity, the access, the solutions along and through these corridors, but then also the connections beyond into those more regional areas of how they can get to those core connectors and movement corridors across the region. And we'll be looking to roll out the strategic approach and priorities within these strategic corridors, as well as looking at specific schemes and interventions as well. Once we developed the strategic approach to the transport strategy, we moved on to looking at how we can improve the investment and delivery approach, wanting to move those schemes that have been identified already faster through that business case making process with government, securing that investment quicker, shortening the period between identifying a concept or an idea for a project and getting it to the point where it has got allocated funding from a specific pot from the DfT or other government departments. So we've we'll be consulting on a new approach to accelerating investment and delivery planning, which is aligned with the DFT appraisal process, and will be iterated along with any changes to that, and also aligns to our own strategic approach. We've identified 55 regional strategic projects from the ideas phase all the way through into delivery, and we'll be updating this as things are delivered and are committed, but also as new ideas come through our work and the work of our local transport authorities and other delivery partners. This will form the basis of our strategic advice to government on priorities, and then taking it through for specific funding pots. So within the consultation materials, there's a full document setting out this approach in more detail and identifying where existing priorities sit on our delivery framework as well. As I mentioned, across each of those pathways, we have the strategic priority that has a pathway with the goals identified, and within those goals there's a set of supporting actions that Transport East has committed to progress those at a strategic and regional level. This slide sets out some of those ideas that we've committed to across each of those different pathways. So for decarbonisation, strategic coordination on the accelerating the delivery of electric vehicle infrastructure, strategic rail, buses and active travel. We've established already a bus and active travel subgroup. We're working with Network Rail and have recently established a regional strategic rail group as well. We've got a joint engagement plan with National Highways to make sure that we're embedding ourselves in the way that they build their planning and delivery process as well. So we make sure that our priority schemes are the ones that get embedded into their route strategy analysis and investment and delivery programmes. We'll be looking to build up particularly the analytical and modelling capability to understand and deliver the projects that have greatest impact in reaching net zero in the East, supporting local initiatives and addressing gaps, and looking at that from a people perspective, so the types of journeys that people want to make, and focusing less on the types of vehicles that are already being used and the modes that are already being used. Defining a regional approach to proactively inform future national changes in the possibility for paying for transport work stream that the DFT is working on, to make sure that it really reflects our region and gets the best deal for us. In connecting growing towns and cities, again, a lot of this is around data, toolkits and strategic capability to support local authorities to develop and accelerate the projects and the business cases, making sure that we've got the evidence that is most listened to by government and really makes the best case possible for the intervention wanting to bring forward. Looking at the next generation of mass rapid transit, strategic rail, things like bus rapid transit schemes and new rail connections, and how we can use our roads in the future to 2050. Looking at those core corridors to identify and make the case for the next generation of improvements, enhancing business cases for large scale interventions, particularly things like East West Rail Eastern section, and then regional level projects to support local authorities, passenger transport, buses and active travel as well. So that integration piece, that customer interface piece, and things like smart ticketing and fares. In terms of rural and coastal communities, we are the lead STB on rural mobility at the minute. So out of the 7, we are taking the lead on developing and making the case for rural transport investment. It's an area that the DFT recognises that maybe is a bit weaker in the way that they currently appraise transport schemes. Historically, a lot of it has been on the value of time and the value of mass movement, which means that the more rural and coastal interventions struggle to be able to make case that meets those criteria across the DFT. But we're working with other STBs, particularly those that have similar challenges to us. So those in the southwest and western area, Somerset down to Devon and Cornwall, to be able to initially make a short and snappy case for improving and increasing the investment in rural transport interventions. And then on ports and airports, one of the next steps that we'll be taking is developing a future of freight plan for the East to tackle some of those strategic issues that are faced by communities, including things like lorry parking and provision for drivers, something that has come into sharp focus over the last few months, decarbonising freight and those solutions around longer term solutions around rail freight and short sea shipping. Finally, a few points about the consultation that we'll be launching next week. So it will be covering the draft strategy, the draft investment and delivery programme, and the integrated sustainability appraisal that we've undertaken to underpin this work. Launching actually more like very early December and then running to the end of January 2022. It's digitally led, so there'll be a virtual exhibition space available similar to the picture that you've got on the screen, where people will be able to come in and explore the boards and the contents any time of the day, but pick and choose the boards that they want to view most. We're also hosting two public online webinars through that period, so one in mid-December, one in mid-January, and available will also be a video animation to take people through the transport strategy at a very high level. We recognise that regional transport strategies aren't necessarily the most exciting thing that the public might want to get involved in, but this is setting the direction for the region's transport for the next 30 years, and it's really important that we understand the challenges and the issues and the views of our communities while we as we refine this approach. It's also a fair step change in the way that we've thought about transport regionally in the past as well, and I think sets out clearly some of the challenges and the opportunities that exist for the region in upgrading and improving its transport networks to really improve the quality of life and the opportunities for people across Suffolk and the rest of the eastern region. So we really welcome, obviously, your submissions, your formal submissions from your authorities. Your officers have been given us excellent insight and advice in the engagement that we've had over the last 12 months, but we recognise that there'll invariably be points that you'd like to make as well, but also encourage you to help us promote this to your communities and make sure that we do get the widest response from across the region from those public views. So that is my formal.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Questions, Tim?
Thanks. Morning, everybody. Sorry I was late, but hope you got my apologies. Yeah, that's from what I heard of it, and I might have missed a few pieces out on this at the beginning, but I have a degree of nervousness about putting all our eggs in one basket, and that's electrical charging for vehicles and transportation and so on, particularly, as you mentioned, Ellesmere, in rural areas. And if this is a strategic plan, or whatever you like to call it, for the next 30 years, what does Transport East, what's your view about hydrogen technology to run us alongside electrical charging, bearing in mind that Freeport East, I understand, is going to have at least some hydrogen manufacturing capability? Surely there are opportunities there. And from a policing point of view, there's no way we can just rely on electrification for response going at 120 miles an hour. And the BMW, of course, I would say that conks out halfway there.
Yes, hydrogen is very much on our horizon, and we've been talking particularly to Hydrogen East, who are working kind of across the region to progress the development of hydrogen within the eastern region, and using the opportunities that we've got from some of our energy infrastructure to be able to make the best use of hydrogen production and storage across the eastern region. So it's certainly within the strategy. I think it's one of those areas that maybe is not quite as well understood at the minute about what is both possible and realistic, but particularly with the amount of freight that we've got moving through the region, and some of the types of vehicles that local authorities use, both from a bus perspective, but also from a waste perspective. Hydrogen's got to be part of that long-term solution, certainly.
And just a quick one, if I may, Suzie. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't perhaps look at pilot projects involving blue light services, local authorities in some areas. Then we could set up a centre of innovative excellence as per Addistral Park for telecoms and ICT here in Suffolk. And, you could be big players in that if you wanted to.
Blue light services, certainly we'd be very interested to have a further discussion on that. We'll pick it up with you, Tim.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Matthew?
Thanks, Suzie. Hi, Esme. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really useful, and clearly great work's gone on. As one of the 7 STPs, obviously we have a huge opportunity, and we can be very vocal and represent the area. And you talk about being the single voice for transport investment, and I think everything we can do to bring that together is very positive. From our position here in Suffolk, we have talked about an SPSL we have supported financially, bringing forward the Hawley Junction and obviously in Ely. We keep hoping that we're getting close to the front of the queue. And obviously there's been recent announcements of funding, and Hawley didn't come forward, or Ely. Is there anything you can say in terms of comment on that as to how what you're doing might accelerate that, or get it, because we always think we're close, but we haven't had any announcements yet. So just wondering if you could add anything to that.
So within our comprehensive spending review submission earlier in the summer and into the autumn, Hawley Junction was front and centre of that submission as in terms of the short-term priorities for the region. We're working closely with the Ely Task Force as well, who are, I think they're currently in one of their final consultations for the improvements to the Ely area upgrade, and I believe it will be putting in their, I'm not quite sure what level of business case submission, but it's looking like it will be early 2022. I can't comment on obviously kind of the DFT announcements in terms of things like Hawley, but we are the integrated rail plan that went out last week, the week before, was obviously taking up quite a lot of time within the DFT and attention, and we understand from our contacts that the next phase of rail investment is now now that has been announced and dealt with, is now being looked at. So we're talking to the DFT on a regular basis. We're pushing Hawley particularly because it is not large amounts of money when it comes to rail investment, and has been on the pipeline for quite some time. Similar discussions obviously with National Highways and the DFT on some of the road investment programs as well, and obviously you'll be aware that the Coptock interchange consultations out with National Highways currently, as is A12 further south. Final consultation on that. So there is schemes, progress being made on schemes, but they do have a tendency to get into the DFT and get stuck there in terms of the appraisal processes, and we're doing all that we can to push those through.
Well, thanks, Esme, for that. And as you know, we're all fully supportive. And if there's anything more you need from us, please do ask. Because our commitment's totally there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. John?
Thanks, Esme, for a thorough presentation. And I do echo your comments about how important this is, and we really do need to encourage our residents to engage with this, because it will have a huge impact on their futures. What I just wanted to say was I do recognise and agree that we need to focus on the strategic corridors, but I think we must be mindful of the fact that so many of our towns and villages and larger villages are dotted all over the place. And in order to really achieve modal shift, and indeed the goal 6 about faster and more reliable connections between our communities, will ultimately need more than those strategic corridors. But I do recognise that they need to focus on those at least at the moment.
Yeah, I agree on that as well, Councillor Ward. I think ultimately we'd like to get to a position of a good network understanding of what's needed across the region, and that includes the smaller towns and market towns that are so crucial to a lot of our communities, and actually are the basis for a lot of our economic activity as well. So it was what I was saying about that kind of web, is that actually not everybody's just going into Ipswich and back again. They're going out to Stowmarket, they're going across to Sudbury, they're going out to Woodbridge and Felixstowe. So it's it's a really challenging picture, I think, particularly in Suffolk, if I'm honest, because of its central position across the whole region. You've got journeys going up into Norwich, you've got journeys going down into Essex as well, and across into Cambridge from the western side. So it is quite a challenging picture in terms of transport solutions and provisions, and I think that's why we've got to figure out what will work for this region, what is innovative and what is actually financially sustainable as well for those communities, so that we can make sure that they are getting a better provision to the locations that they really want to get to.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, John. John?
Thank you, Suzie, and thank you, Esme. Very helpful presentation. I mean, I'm delighted you just mentioned the west of Suffolk and the Cambridge sub-region, because they're quite important. And I'm just adding to what both Matthew and John said. It probably is worth reminding the DFT and government in your discussions that we are actually in the East net contributors to the national economy, etc., etc. So it would be in their interests to help us be even more net contributors. So don't want to repeat the words of Matthew and John, which were much better than I could have put them. But thank you again, Esme.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments from me. In terms of decarbonisation, or moving to reducing our emissions, Mid Suffolk, together with Babergh, we've been the first rural district to convert all of our public fleet to HVO, which is now cutting our CO2 emissions by up to 90%. So all 35 of our waste lorries, plus our public realm fleet, plus our housing teams, they are all now HVO fleets. Now, you mentioned that, I think you said it was 42% of transport contributes 42% to our carbon emissions. Do you have a breakdown on that between whether it's HGV or private? Do we have any intel on that?
So the further analysis that we've done indicates that it's around 50-50 HGV private, and also that it's around 50-50 rural, more versus more urban. But there's a few caveats around that, in that the baseline evidence isn't that well established at the minute. So we were using national highways data to be as the roads that we were analysing. So it might overemphasise the freight element of it, because obviously they are more likely to be using those roads than they are other roads within the region. We've got another phase of work that we're scoping out currently to try and drill down into all of that data in a bit more detail, to see if we can sense check it, but also refine it to make sure that we really understand what's happening against the different modes, the different geographies, and the different types of journeys being made as well.
Yes, because there's clearly a lot that can be done locally in terms of, well, even just as councillors and councils in influencing within Suffolk, but also across the wider piece. On the strategic corridors, you have got Felixstowe to the Midlands in there, haven't you? I mean,
Yeah.
I could... Okay, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Definitely in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, because when it flashed up on the screen, I couldn't see it, but I did remember reading it and knowing it was there. But when you put it on the screen,
the colours might not have come through that.
Okay.
I mean, and just on the freight point, I think it's one of those things that we've also got to again make to national government the point that our region, is experiencing the impact of the UK demand. So we are that gateway. We are a crucial facilitator to businesses in the Midlands, in London, in the north, and we are the area that is feeling the most impact from it. So it's pushing government further and faster on things like HGV, decarbonisation plans and solutions to be able to bring that impact down for our communities, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Esme. Anybody else got any questions for Esme? No, lovely. Thank you very much, Esme.
Thank you very much for your time today, everybody. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. We're going to have an update from the Collaborative Communities work, the work that they've been doing on supporting communities with hardship. And we've got Chrissy Geeson with us to talk us through this. Thank you, Chrissy. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I've got a couple of updates for you this morning. So I'm bringing an update on hardship. But in particular, I wanted to touch on the household support grant that we've recently received into Suffolk and how that's supporting the work of hardship across the county. I then wanted to briefly touch on the commissioned work that Suffolk public sector leaders have asked the Collaborative Communities Board to do with regard to early help. So I'm going to share my screen, so fingers crossed. Now I've got a black screen. I'm not sure if anybody can see me or...
We can see the slides, but they just need to come to presentation mode.
Right, thank you.
That's lovely.
Great, thank you very much. So, in October, on the 6th of October, the Department of Work and Pensions announced a new grant fund would be paid to Suffolk County Council, and we were to receive £5.1 million. Colleagues might be aware that we have previously had other grant funds paid into Suffolk, and they were branded as winter grant funds originally, and then we had the one in the summer. This is the latest version of that. What I would say is that this one comes with slightly more freedom for us to be able to use it locally in the best way that we feel. So the process by which we receive the money is in arrears. So we spend the money and then we submit management information returns, 2 of those, one in January and the second one is due in April 2022, and then we get paid back the money that we have spent. So we've got this discretion to shape and spend the money locally to meet our needs. There is a requirement on us to consider and identify a broad range of vulnerable people who would benefit from this fund across the county. So households in need of essential living costs over the winter are the main beneficiaries of this fund. It's not a substitute for the universal credit uplift. This is very separate to that, and this is very separate to the end of furlough as well. This is an additional payment. There are some things that we are not able to spend this money on. We can't use it to pay somebody's mortgage payments. If somebody is in difficulty with their tenancy, if a payment from this fund could potentially get them over a very difficult time and move them back into a sustainable tenancy, that's fine. But if it's an unsustainable tenancy, we can't use this money for that. We can't use it for ongoing housing support. And it can't be spent on items such as phones or laptops. And we can't pre-purchase vouchers in advance of spend after the end of March 22. So previously, where the Easter holidays, for example, have overlapped March and April, we've looked at pre-purchasing vouchers for those children eligible for free school meals. We can't do that. It's very specific that we can't do that with this fund. So the criteria for spending this fund is that 50% must go to families with children. So it's the minimum of 50%. We can spend obviously more than that. And 50%, up to 50% can go to any other household. We are not required to do means or benefits checks for those people who are applying for the fund. Free school meals is in scope, and we have provided free school meal vouchers to eligible families in the past holiday. We'll be doing so again over Christmas, and we can claim reasonable administration costs. So some of the examples of support that we're providing are food, utilities and clothing, boiler repairs, phone and broadband costs, housing costs in those exceptional cases. And we've done that by allocating some of this fund directly to the housing teams across Suffolk who can use their discretion to support people in housing need. And we can't carry forward any underspend. So this is how we've allocated our funding. So to support free school meals, to support the existing local welfare assistance scheme, and Suffolk public sector leaders have previously given us a large amount of money, £800,000 to support local welfare. This provision of this additional funding has enabled us to pause the drawdown from the Suffolk public sector leaders pot, and we can use this winter grant fund. And the really great news is that means that extends the length of the local welfare assistance scheme out quite a lot further. We think we can do it for at least another 12 months because of this fund, so that's really positive. We've given grant funding to grassroots organisations and voluntary sector groups who support communities directly, so we've given some money there. The proactive targeting of vulnerable cohorts. So one of the requirements is that we identify people who would benefit from this grant, proactively contact them, and we've done that. We've started doing that by writing to them, writing letters, and I've got an update on that in a moment. And then, as I spoke about earlier, the housing support for our districts and boroughs. So I just wanted to give a brief update on where we are so far, because obviously we've been running this now for over a month. So we sent the first batch of our proactive letters out this last week. We sent 1,400 letters out. So far, we've received 623 applications for access to this grant, and we've made 589 payments this week. So the total amount on that first payment run is £71,000. So you know, it's a huge uptake, which is really positive for us, because we feel that we are meeting that expectation that we'll find and identify those that are vulnerable to access this fund. All free school meal eligible children have been provided with a voucher in the previous holiday, and again will do so in the Christmas holiday. We currently have around 21,500 children who are eligible for free school meals in Suffolk. We've topped up the Warmer Homes Fund. This supports those people who are being discharged from hospital, and that fund enables an officer to go into their home and check their heating and their boiler and make sure that everything is fit and warm for them to return back to their homes. And our colleagues in East Suffolk Council manage that on behalf of the county. And then the local welfare assistance scheme, we've topped that fund up, as I previously described. And I can just give colleagues a short update on the applications that we've had in. So we've seen a 48% increase between September and where we are now in November. So in May, when we started with this local welfare assistance scheme with the current funding, we were receiving about 150 applications per month for support. That's steadily risen all the way through the year. October, we hit our highest ever number. We had 317 applications in for that fund. And in November, we're projected to reach at least 350. We suspect it will be nearer the 400 mark. So there's a substantial increase in the amount of claims that we're getting coming through. So that's an update on how we're using this fund to support our hardship work across the county. Chair, I don't know whether you wanted me to take any questions before I go into my second presentation.
Yes, we'll pause there. Anybody got any questions for Chrissy? No, just keep. Oh, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Chrissy. Really useful update. And I suppose it's just a basic question around capacity to manage the projected increase in the workload. And do you and your team have capacity in order to pick that up?
It's a really good question, and at the moment we're okay. I think the issue is with these short-term funds that we often wind down the resource that we've got in a team, and I know everybody's experienced that through COVID. We, in our own customer services across districts and boroughs, a really good example of where we've pulled lots of resource in to help, and then they've gone back to their substantive roles, and then there's a new demand comes in, and we're on that wave really. So with this one in particular, we had almost sort of gone back to business as usual, because after the last fund ended, we didn't realise we were going to be asked to do another one. But at the moment, you know what our staff are like in Suffolk, Steve. I mean, what can I say? They're amazing, aren't they? We have got people that are doing additional hours in the evenings and weekends, and volunteering to help us get through the applications and the payment run. So all sorts of people stuffing envelopes and answering the phone. But yes, at the moment, thank you, we are managing. Thank you.
Okay. If I may, Suzie, I think it's really important that you keep us in mind. Should you be feeling actually we're struggling a bit here, because it's admirable that I know the staff, Chrissy, and they do go above and beyond, but also we need to look after them as well. So please do come back to us if you're thinking actually we're getting a bit snowed under here, and we're at risk of either harming our staff or not delivering the level of service that we want. So that would be my ask. Thank you, Chrissy.
Very kind. I'll bear that in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, carry on, Chrissy.
Right, I'm going to find the other presentation now, so please bear with me just for a moment. All right, I don't know if colleagues can see that. I'm not going to present the whole presentation. I just really wanted to run through this timeline with colleagues. So the Collaborative Communities Board worked jointly through the COVID response, and we used a proactive model of identifying people in our community that may benefit from some additional support. We used some data that we'd gathered from across the system to help us to do that, and we found that was a really successful model, and that we were able to identify people who may need support at the very earliest opportunity. We then had some conversations at Suffolk Public Sector leaders about the ongoing work that's happening at East Suffolk Council in regard to a community early help model, and they've been working in this space for a long time along with colleagues across the system. And we looked at how we might be able to use what we'd learned in COVID and combine it with the work that's happening already in this space in our communities to identify people at the earliest opportunity and to provide some community-based wraparound support and help. And as a result of that, Suffolk public sector leaders have commissioned the Collaborative Communities Board to go away and investigate this model. So this is a very brief update of where we are so far. So the new pilot in East Suffolk is building on the existing work that's going there and includes 2 officers that are doing some very, very ultra-local bespoke work in East Suffolk to identify and work up a model that would be most effective. So we're all watching that and learning from that. We had £400,000 commissioned to us by SCOLT and Suffolk public sector leaders in July. We had a workshop in September, which was opened by Alan Cadzo, who is our Director of Children's Services in Suffolk. And that really was to start the conversation about what a community early help model would look like in Suffolk. We are currently agreeing what the mechanism for the 2-year rollout of the warm handover is in Suffolk, and that's a digital platform by which we would enable this connection across all of the community and voluntary sector groups, and we're having those conversations at the moment. So we've got a digital platform supporting this piece of work, and then we are intending to have an implementation and rollout in 2022. We might be able to bring that forward a little bit. The thing that I really wanted to update on today is that the timing of this, it just couldn't be better. So our colleagues in Children's Services at the moment are working on a new family hub model, which is building on the Children's Centre model, but it's expanding that to cover a wider, broader age range and to include the whole family in the work that they're doing. And as part of that development work, it's really important that there's wide support from the community to wrap around these families and young people that might need some additional support. So I'm having conversations at the moment with colleagues in Children's Services and members of the Collaborative Communities Board about how we work up a model that would almost give us an end-to-end line, if you like, of from the very, very earliest identification in the community, utilising the new family hubs, and then, unfortunately, if we're not able to prevent escalation, then how we would include our social care services at the top end of that line. So it's quite an exciting time for us. There is more to say, but I think for now that's probably a really good reflection on where we are. I'm really happy to take any questions. That's quite a quick and easy update.
Lovely, thank you. Steve?
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks, Chrissy. I mean, this is an incredibly exciting project and one that really is going to support the Suffolk system right across the Suffolk system, because as we've spoken about before, if getting in at a very early stage actually protects resources much further down the road, which otherwise does involve significant cost and significant officer and volunteer time in order to address those issues. So this is a really, really great project and building on something that we've been doing, as you say, in East Suffolk for a number of years. So I've seen the benefits of that locally, and I'm absolutely sure that those benefits will be seen right across the Suffolk system in all of our partner organisations and the voluntary groups as well. So many thanks for the update, and I'm glad to hear it's still on track and is likely to deliver the ambitions we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Thank you. If you could just stop sharing your screen, Chrissy. Chrissy's been a regular contributor to Suffolk public sector leaders over the last 3 years, and this is going to be I believe this is going to be your last public meeting.
Yes, I believe so.
Before you escape us. So on behalf of SPSL, I really want to thank you for all your work and support in this role. It really has been invaluable across the whole of the Suffolk system. So thank you ever so much for everything that you've done.
Thank you very much. Oh, that's really fine. Thank you. I wasn't expecting that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Our next item is our International Trade Managers Annual Update. So these are our I'd like to welcome Michael Chapman and Koyas Mia, who are our international trade managers at the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. So as you'll no doubt remember, we agreed to fund 450,000 of our pooled funds over 3 years into this team. And it's really important to support all our Suffolk businesses and in maximising our trade potential. So over to you, Michael and Koyas. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Chapman, just a very quick introduction, and I'll allow my colleague, Koyas, to do his little introduction.
Good morning to everyone. So Koyas Mia, and obviously into one of the international trade managers.
Yeah, so you're going to get a bit of a double act, so value for money this morning. And hopefully our presentation is in the virtual wings waiting for us to come up. As I said, we are going to do a double act through the presentation. I'll kick off with some introductory remarks, and then we'll pass on to Koyas, who'll do a couple of slides, and I'll come back again for the last slide. So can I have the next slide, please? So just to give you a reminder, and thank you, Councillor Morley, for already mentioning some of that context. Suffolk Trade initiative funded by leaders. We're going up to the end of 2023 and managed by Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. Our high-level goal is really to set out the principles for a supporting framework to develop a robust Suffolk trade policy. And I think the reasons why that is our direction of travel is because we're trying to respond and adapt to the new economic realities that Suffolk businesses are facing and the Suffolk economy. We're looking at the COVID recovery pathway. We're looking at Brexit and its wider context of global Britain. We're looking at the government's levelling up agenda. And of course, importantly, there's that whole issue of climate change. So wrapping all that up to like a holistic integrated trade policy is certainly challenging, but with your leadership, I think we've definitely got an innovative approach, and we are working to remain sort of ahead of the curve in that sense of what other localities are doing. And some of you might be who've already seen this, but the Local Government Association in September produced a paper on how councils can support the export sector within their economy. I think that was led by Councillor Bentley from Essex. So it's good that we are ahead, but we want to we can't just rest on our laurels. We want to keep going. We do see ourselves as a partner of choice. So we're supporting the business community and the public sector to actually try to highlight relevant trade policy issues to the right people at the right time. So it's actually just sort of, we're maximising our ability to understand what's going on at quite high level, international levels, all the way right down to local levels, and then be able to actually come up with some responses. What we actually do on a day-to-day basis, and this is the core of everything that we do, is direct business engagement. So it has been, again, challenging because of COVID. Of course, that's had quite restrictions upon us. We're doing face-to-face events or face-to-face meetings and events, but we have managed to actually do more business contacts in the last 9 months than we did in the sort of previous 16 months. So it shows that there is demand. We are helping businesses navigate that future relationship with the European Union, but also we are spotting opportunities for rest of the world growth. And I think importantly, so as an additional here, we're keeping Suffolk updated, through sort of looking at the trends, the policies, and the data, and showing that the fact that we can create, and support a future economically resilient Suffolk economy. So I'll stop there and I'll hand over now to Coyes.
Thanks, Mike. So in this slide, what we wanted to really show and share with yourself is some of the work that we have been doing so far. So I'll go through some of the case studies in how we have been supporting Suffolk businesses. So on the first case study, it's a mid-Suffolk based business specialising in lifting equipment, main market being the EU and the UK. Suffolk Trade helped the business understand the process of carnet, which helped the business then move their tools and machineries between countries. West Suffolk based business specialising in agricultural machinery. The UK-EU trade agreement brought sort of many challenges for them, from sending sort of engineers to the EU, servicing, conformity, as well as moving spare parts and machineries across the border. Suffolk Trade helped the business in exploring the options of setting up subsidiary with the help of some of our specialist contacts. This means that the business can also continue operating within the European market. We supported a mid-Suffolk based business in warehousing, distribution and services, understand the new processes and procedures for importation of goods from non-EU country into the UK and then sort of re-exporting into the EU. The key element of the import journey involves knowing the rules of origin to access preferential duties. An East Suffolk based business specialising in training and support wanted to explore the option of expanding into global market. Suffolk Trade, with the support of the BCC Global Network and professional contacts, helped the business with market research and highlighted the importance of intellectual property rights. The business ended up deciding not to trade due to the complication of IP rights. They were grateful, obviously, for our advice, as it potentially helped the business from any entrenchments. And then the final case study I just want to share with yourselves is a small business in Ipswich who manufacture and retail home fragrances. Due to the sort of lack of confidence and knowledge, it stopped them from trading with the EU. But Suffolk Trade helped the business in sort of going through exporting planning, which then gave the confidence for the business to be able to then trade within the EU and help with business growth. And then potentially explore other global markets. So this is just a little snapshot of some of the ways that we have been supporting Suffolk businesses. If we can go on the next slide, please. So here we want to just look at our kind of future actions. So in addition to the policy work and sort of business engagement, we'd like to share some of the additional activities that we plan for next year, so 2022. We'd like to look at aligning our priorities with our growth hub partners, so i.e. the A14 Road Rail Trade Investment Corridor and Suffolk Inclusive Framework. We want to look at raising the awareness and business readiness for the implementation of phased import controls from the 1st of July. This involves connecting with East Suffolk Council and Port Health teams. We want to maximise on breed trade opportunities for Suffolk businesses. We would like to develop our own capacity to improve data analytics so that we can better understand business trading in Suffolk and be able to then support those businesses effectively. We would like to support new exporters in promoting their trading opportunities. And food and drink being one of the sort of key sectors in Suffolk, we would like to help identify new markets for the Suffolk food and drink businesses. So I'll pass you over to Mike to go through the next slide.
Thanks, Coyes. So just mainly as sort of a conclusion, we just want to, as we're reporting back to leaders, is just, to note the work that we are doing, and hopefully you can see the additionality that we are providing, especially in the sort of post-COVID recovery phase. And as Coyes alluded to, is your support in the way that our direction of travel of aligning the work of Suffolk Trade with sort of key growth delivery partners. So as working through with Suffolk Growth Partnership being key, and for that to be how we want to move that forward. And you can probably guess that trade is becoming more important as a cross-cutting issue by government, whether that be from levelling up or whether it's going to be through the climate change agenda. And of course, with the presentation we just had from Transport East, there was a trade element. So all these policy silos need to be sort of connected, and there will be a sort of a trade theme running through them all. Also, I'd just like to say that see as an asset. I mean, I'm not trying to sort of over egg ourselves as being a valuable asset, but we are an asset for Suffolk businesses and for the public sector. So please use us when and whenever you would like to. And finally, as just a sort of I think a formality for releasing funding, which will also keep John Dugmore at the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce very happy. So that's it from us. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Coyce. Tim?
Thanks, Suzie, and thanks, gents, for the presentation. Always like to make Comrade Dugmore happy, of course. That's one of our key attributes here. But no, seriously, very interesting. What else can we do as public sector leaders group, bearing in mind collectively, I suppose, our spend in the county, if you include health, prisons, everybody else and so on, is I think somewhere between 8 and 9 billion quid a year. I know a lot of it goes on staff, but is there anything else we need to do to lobby, pressurise government, of course, to support the work that you're doing? Always a great believer in pressurising governments. I know you've been talking about procurement to the Suffolk Growth Group and so on. I'm sure there is more we could do on that. You mentioned food and drink, a subject dear to my heart, not because I like it, but because I've got a farming background, or perhaps both. But is there anything else we can do? And the other thing is on the inward investment programme, that I think some of us are inward investment ambassadors. Is there more we can do to attract inward investment? And the reason I mention all this, because if we don't get the economy motoring ahead, frankly, we've all got one hell of a problem, because that is where we're going to help earn the money to pay down national debt, expand the tax base, etc., etc. So there's 2 or 3 points there, and I don't know who'd like to take them, or whether you wish to divvy them up. But I would really be interested to hear what else we can do to support you in this crucial work.
Great, thanks, Tim. I'll kick off and say it was my last sort of point about seeing us assets and actually potentially using us in a strategic way. So I think we've now managed to, or beginning to work more closely with relevant sort of skills and econ dev teams. But I think, this is not criticism, because everyone is extremely busy, that they do tend to work in silos. And sometimes we lose sight of that wider strategic. So just from every sort of, council, local authority, district level and other stakeholders, is to keep us in mind, because everyone has been quite focused on the COVID recovery, and as in the post-COVID recovery, sort of trade and investment is going to become, as you mentioned, vital. So if you need us to come in and comment on something, with the senior management teams or whatever, then please do. Lobbying, yes, always remember us. I think we've got a very good and a very innovative model, which should be, and we don't do enough of this in Suffolk, is shout from the rooftops when we've got something good. So if you've got any way to do that, that would be fantastic. I would hold back on being ambitious at the moment, or us being ambitious and asking for loads of resource and we can solve the world's problems, because we are still in a period where businesses are trying to settle down post-COVID. We've still got inflation, we've got inflationary pressures, and we've still got issues, with the rollout of Brexit, because Brexit hasn't finished. It's still going to go on through 2022. So I think we're getting close, to a period where the government will, as it just launched its sort of export strategy 2 weeks ago, where we can actually formulate a potential better ask, if that's, I think at the moment we're doing fine, but I certainly, and it's my personal view as well, I think actually making the link and bringing trade and investment together is crucial, and therefore we are creating an internationalisation agenda, which then all public sector can get behind, because it has a number of different ways, whether it is actually in procurement, where it's actually looking at skills, where it's actually looking at the way we actually do tackle climate change, there are going to be opportunities. So it's a sort of great. Thank you very much for the support, but we'll certainly come back to you. So I don't know if Cohorts has got anything.
I'll just echo what Mike said. Sorry, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Okay, so just to clarify, I'd like to check with leaders about your response to Mike and Cohorts' recommendations, which is that we note the work of the Suffolk trade and its additionality, the wider post-pandemic recovery of the Suffolk economy, supporting the alignment of Suffolk trade activities with key growth delivery partners, stakeholders and strategies, and promote Suffolk trade as a valuable asset for both the Suffolk business community and public sector. And finally, to agree the release of the previously committed funding for year 2, which is, just to clarify, is 90,000 from the business rates and 40,000 from the EU Exit Pooled Fund. Can you all, leaders, can you give me a thumbs up? Lovely. Thank you very much, guys. Lovely. Thank you very much, Mike and Cohorts. Lovely to see you. Moving on to our next item. This is a paper from Matthew, Councillor Hicks, on the Air Quality Summit that is coming up soon. Matthew.
Thanks, Suzie. This is just really very brief. It's just really to give everyone the heads up that on the 28th of January, the Public Health and Communities team will be holding an air quality summit with speakers from both local and national organisations. And the aim is to try and look at to introduce what air quality might be in terms of how it might be relevant to the quality across Suffolk. It's going to look at what roles we all have nationally as a county, locally, district, borough, and as individuals. And there are going to be guest speakers coming along. There's going to be a panel discussion. Now, this summit is aimed at all councillors across Suffolk, service leads and senior managers from other organisations such as the CCGs and NHS, etc. And it's the start of a journey. So all of this will then feed back into the Health and Wellbeing Board at some point beyond the meeting, and it will help to sort of inform us as we sort of start rolling forward that wider piece of work. So all I do is just wanted to flag it up. This is clearly a long-term priority for public health, looking at air quality, and the summit will raise the awareness of air quality to us all. So it's the start of a journey. I would ask people to who are in that category to please sign up and join in, and then that will come back to the Health and Wellbeing Board in due course. Thank you, Suzie.
Thank you very much, Matthew. The next item is our budget update, and I'm going to hand over to Ian Gallant to introduce this report to give an overview of our pooled funds. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Suzie. Again, I'll be pretty brief because leaders have got the paper. Just the two things really, just to remind you and then draw to your attention that the paper, the budget you got reflects the decision you took in June around the allocation, the earmarking of funds to support the wider recovery strategy, and it also now updates on your decision of your 24th of September meeting to allow the climate change group to draw down £150,000 to support their work and the delivery of that strategy, and also the second tranche to support the Suffolk Inclusive Growth Investment Fund of £750,000. So that's just recorded in that paper, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Anybody got any questions? No? Lovely. Thank you very much, Ian. Any other business? Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Suzie. Just a question, really, if I may, under any other business. Well, and it's directed at Matthew. I'm aware, or really, I'd just like to hear any updates on any relevance from the County Council Network Conference that I know Matthew has been at, and I suppose in particular in respect of the devolution agenda and whether there's any update on that that's come from the conference. I think it would be useful for us to hear that.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, happy to just touch on that. So, of course, there was lots of speculation and discussion. Michael Gove did attend the conference. I think really at this stage, we've really just got to sit and wait until the white paper comes out. They'll give greater clarity. We know the message from Suffolk is that we've put forward what we believe is a strong case. We have a clear governance structure, and we believe a county deal should be a Suffolk county deal with Suffolk borders. There is speculation that the big ambition for government is to have mayors, but we've been very clear at this stage that the governance structure within Suffolk works well. Today is a product of that governance structure, where actually we can come together, work for what's best for Suffolk, and it's an established model. So at this stage, there's nothing more to report. Of course, there's always speculation at conferences as to who might have a deal, who hasn't. We'll need to wait till the white paper comes out, and that will be the point at which we'll have greater clarity.
Thank you, Matthew, and thanks, Suzie. And I mean, I would just echo those words. We seem to have a system that works. Let's not break it in any way, just so that we can have someone in a tricorn hat floating around the county or two counties or so. But yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Steve.
Tricorn hat. Good grief.
Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I hope they're wearing more than the tricorn hat, Steve. But anyway, just a couple of very quick points, if I may, Suzie. Thank you very much to all those who replied to our draft police and crime plan, and all the comments there will be fully embedded in the final version that goes before the police and crime panel in January, ready to roll on with it, all being well, at the beginning of the next financial year. The only other thing I just wanted to remind people about, you may have heard of the review of PCC, I don't know, status or whatever else it's called. That is due to be published imminently, and I can't give you a clearer outline from that because the first part of the review was going to be published, I think, about this time last year, and we got it in about March. But there may or may not be implications for CSPs. That's why I wanted to mention it to everybody. We'll have to wait and see. No point in panicking or wondering what on earth's happening until these findings are published. It may be a complete damp squib, just like round one was. And frankly, all that hot air delivered nothing, as far as I was concerned. But just to keep you informed. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Tim. Any other business? No? Okay, so our next meeting is on the 25th of February at 10:30. I'd like to thank all of you for attending today. Thank you very much for your input, and lovely to see you all.
Have a lovely week.
Robert, if you could stop the recording, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Suzie.
Bye, everyone.